Hello students, this is your history video for Wednesday, October 21st. Today you guys are going to be reading the history of Christianity. So what this kind of lays out is what was the foundation of Christianity, which is talked about in the beginning, which is the life and then the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And then his disciples, his followers, spread that word, and they actually ended up getting more people to spread the word. And they highlight a man named Paul. So Paul was a persecutor of Christians. That means that he tortured and killed them, and then he got radically changed and became a Christian, and he continued spreading. So they talk about that in there as well. And then they talk about how the Christian church kind of changed. And to clarify, most of the time, in most of what they're talking about, Christian and Catholic are combined. They're kind of talking about the exact same thing, but it wasn't until the 1500s that the people that believed the Bible strictly started to have questions about the way that the officials in the church were running things. They were right here in this section. It talks about them selling these things called indulgences, and an indulgence was a way to pay off your sin. So if you did something wrong, like let's say you murdered someone, but you had enough money, you could pay that off, and then you wouldn't get a punishment for it anymore. So people were paying, if you were rich, you were able to pretty much do whatever you wanted because you could pay your way out of it. But if you were poor, you had to be really careful because you couldn't pay your way out of it. And so if you thought, maybe I'm not going to get into heaven if I don't do this thing or that thing or this thing, because you couldn't pay for it. So people started really having problems with that. And then a man named Martin Luther came in. Don't confuse this with Martin Luther King Jr. Those are two separate men, but both of them are very influential in history. So this is Martin Luther, the original. And Martin Luther came in and he wrote this thing called the 95 Thesis. And what it was is a list of ways that he felt the church was doing things wrong and ways that the church needed to change. And part of that was saying, you need to stop with the indulgences. You need to stop with this plan that they had come up with. And so then that was a huge factor in the split of the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, and now typically what we call the Catholic Church and then Christian Church. So like somebody might say I'm a Christian and somebody else might say I'm a Catholic. Those are now more separate than they were originally, although there are some parts of Catholicism that still match up with Christianity and vice versa. And so they're still kind of under the same heading. But yeah, it's a little confusing. So that's kind of what was happening in here. And you are going to need to go into your assignment. And it says, question 2, how might the Catholic Church be different today if people like Martin Luther didn't take a stand for reform? So you're just going to look at this and say, what might be different? Would they maybe still be doing indulgences? Would they maybe still be allowing some of the stuff that they had allowed? Oh, another thing that they talked about was the English king and his wife Catherine. She could not have kids, and so he wanted to get a divorce from her, but the Catholic Church would not allow them to get a divorce, and so he decided to split and make the Church of England. And then he gave himself an annulment, which is different than a divorce. It's an annulment says this never happened. They essentially erase the marriage, whereas a divorce says the marriage ended. And so he was able to do that so that then he wouldn't be divorced. He would be able to get remarried and still stay within the church. So that was another part of the split. So maybe if that hadn't happened, then would there be no divorces allowed or something? I don't know. So you're going to look at that and you're going to write up something that you think, how might the Catholic Church be different today if people like Martin Luther didn't take a stand for reform? So what might happen? That is it for today. Have a good one, and I will talk to you later.